Other news now, the urgent search and rescue operation underway for an American woman in the Bahamas. Her husband says she fell off a boat with the key to the boat, and he says she was then swept out to sea. He says he had to paddle back for help, and here's Victor Oquendo.
Tonight, an urgent search underway for a 56-year-old Michigan woman who vanished at sea in the Bahamas after falling off a small boat. Authorities say Lynette Hooker was with her husband Brian when they left Abaco Inn on Elbow Cay around 7:30 p.m. on Saturday, riding in an 8.5-foot-long dinghy back to their yacht. Her husband telling police that due to poor weather, Lynette fell overboard and was swept away by the strong currents, taking the boat's engine key with her. The forecast for that evening showing some scattered storms.
He said that my mom's missing and that she fell out of the boat and that he threw a life jacket to her or something, and he doesn't know if she got it or not. But then he paddled the shore and then he called for help. I just heard that they found the flotation device that was thrown to them or to her when she was swimming away from the boat. It just doesn't add up why she was swimming away from the boat or why she had the keys. Sorry, I have known past issues between them have not been good, so it's just weird that this is happening now. Like, kind of like, okay, you said this was gonna probably happen and now it's happening. So she loved documenting and taking videos. She had a 360 camera she loved using. They have been sailing for over 10 years. They started with this little sailboat with only 2 people could fit on it to a big over 50-foot size sailboat. And they would sail Lake Michigan all the time, and now they're sailing the ocean.
Lynette was 55 years old. She was from Onstead, Michigan, a small town in Lenawee County, the kind of place where everybody knows your business and nobody expects you to do anything extraordinary. Lynette did something extraordinary anyway. She and her husband Brian spent roughly 25 years building a life together, and somewhere along the way, they made a decision that most people only talk about. They sold the house, they gave up the mortgage, the yard, the whole predictable script, and they moved onto a boat, permanently, full-time. No backup plan. She was the kind of woman who documented everything. She shot their adventures on a 360-degree camera, edited her own footage, kept their social media pages running under the name The Sailing Hookers, a name she clearly picked herself. Because it is exactly the kind of thing a person with a sharp sense of humor and zero interest in being boring would choose. She worked out. She explored. She was crafty in the literal sense. She made things with her hands, and she was physically strong. Her daughter, Carly, has said that more than once since this story broke. And I don't think she's saying it to be defensive. I think she's saying it because it matters to understanding what allegedly happened out there on that water. It started small, a 2-person sailboat on Lake Michigan. Then they leveled up to a vessel over 50 feet long, a boat they named Soulmate, which they picked up in Texas and sailed around the Gulf of Mexico, before eventually making their way to the Bahamas. By the time April 2026 rolled around, they had been living this life for over a decade. Yet the sailing logs, the boat repairs, the island hops, the sunsets, all of it documented for anyone who wanted to follow along. She posted her last TikTok 2 days before she disappeared. In it, she was doing what she always did, exploring, filming, living the version of life she had deliberately chosen over the version most people settle for. The man she was doing all of it with was Brian Hooker, her husband of 25 years, 58 years old, the one who drove the dinghy, the one who held the keys, and the one who, on the evening of Saturday, April 4th, 2026, told the Royal Bahamas Police Force that his wife bounced out of a small boat in the dark and was swept away by the current before he could reach her. That is his account. That is what he told investigators. And I want to be careful here, because careful is what this case requires. Brian Hooker has not been charged with anything. No criminal investigation has been formally opened. The authorities in the Bahamas have framed this so far as a tragic accident born of bad decisions. And maybe that's exactly what it is. But here is what I cannot get past. Carly Aylesworth, Lynette's daughter who grew up watching this marriage up close, says there is a history, not a vague history, a specific one. She says Brian choked her mother out on previous occasions. She says he threatened to throw Lynette overboard. She says the marriage had grown volatile, especially when alcohol was involved. And she says the detail about the boat key, the key that allegedly went into the water with Lynette, killing the engine, does not make sense because Brian was always the one who drove. Brian was always the one in control of the key. I'm not telling you what happened on that water. Nobody can do that right now. What I am telling you is that the official account and the family account are not the same story, and the distance between them is where this case actually lives. By the time you finish this episode, you'll understand exactly why Lynette's family is not accepting a single word of the narrative being offered to them. Let's go back to Saturday night. Welcome to Dark Truth Files. A wife, a husband, a dark stretch of Bahamian water, and a story that does not add up. If you're new here, subscribe and hit that like button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. We read every single one. The night of April 4th starts at the Abaco Inn in Hopetown, a small, well-regarded resort sitting on a peninsula on the island of Abaco in the Bahamas. That is where Lynette and Brian had checked in. That is the last place anyone other than Brian saw Lynette Hooker alive. Around 7:30 in the evening, the two of them climbed into their dinghy, an 8-foot hard-bottom inflatable, a small, functional boat that liveaboards use to shuttle between their anchored yacht and the shore. Routine equipment for people who live the way they lived. The Soulmate was anchored near Elbow Cay, roughly 2.5 miles away. The plan was simple: make the crossing, get back to the yacht, end the night. Except they left 4 minutes after sunset. No moon, no visibility, and the weather was not cooperating. Winds were running between 18 and 22 knots that night. The currents in that stretch of water between Hopetown and Elbow Cay are not gentle under good conditions. Under those conditions, they were actively dangerous. 2 experienced sailors, a dark crossing, a boat barely bigger than a dining table. Those are the facts of what they chose to walk into. What happened next comes entirely from Brian. He told investigators that somewhere out on that water, Lynette bounced out of the dinghy. His word, bounced. He said she went over the side, and when she did, she was wearing the engine safety lanyard, the kill switch cord attached to the operator that automatically cuts power to the motor if it detaches. When Lynette went into the water, the lanyard went with her. The engine died instantly. Brian said he threw a flotation device toward her immediately. He said he caught one last glimpse of her in the darkness, swimming hard toward the nearest shoreline, and then the currents took her, and he lost sight of her entirely. With no engine and no way to restart it, Brian was left with a dead boat in rough water at night. He said he tried to paddle back toward Elbow Cay, tried to go after her, but the winds were working against him. 18 to 22 knots of wind against a man paddling an 8-foot dinghy is not a fight he was going to win. The water pushed him north, 4 miles off course, toward Marsh Harbor on Abaco. He eventually made it to shore, beached the dinghy, and pushed through thick bush in the dark until he reached the Marsh Harbor boat yards. He made contact with authorities there at approximately 4 in the morning, nearly 8.5 hours after they left the Abaco Inn. The Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue was notified at 5:12 a.m. on Sunday, April 5th. They launched immediately and searched for 6 straight hours. Nothing. No Lynette, no debris consistent with the incident, no distress signals, no sign of life anywhere in the bay or along the shorelines. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force joined the operation. The U.S. Coast Guard launched aerial sweeps. Drone technology was deployed. Professional divers went into the water. The search spanned the bay, the surrounding ocean, and land areas along the coast. Every realistic zone where currents could have carried a person from that crossing point. By Tuesday, April 7th, 3 days in, the operation changed its classification. Rescue became recovery. That shift in language is not administrative. It is a declaration. It means the people running the search no longer believe they are looking for a survivor. Now, here is where Carly's account starts pulling directly against Brian's. She says Brian called her on Sunday morning to tell her what happened. She says he sounded, and this is her word, monotone, relaxed. She was in shock. She could barely process what he was saying. He told her Lynette had fallen out. He told her he threw a flotation device but didn't know if she reached it. And later, not in that call, but in a voicemail that has since been played publicly on CBS News, he left her a message with this update. "Hello, honey, it's Dad. I just got a call from Hopetown Search and Rescue, and they found the flotation device that I threw to Mom when she fell overboard." Carly flagged two things immediately. First, the key. Lynette never drove the dinghy. Brian drove. Brian held the key. So why did the key go into the water with Lynette? Second, and this one is harder to dismiss, Brian and Lynette had split up at some point in recent years. They got back together. That reconciliation, whatever it looked like behind closed doors, is part of the story nobody has fully told yet. Here is where this case gets complicated in a way that the headlines have not fully captured. There is no criminal investigation, not officially. What exists right now is a police inquiry, the Royal Bahamas Police Force, conducting the standard procedural response to a reported disappearance at sea. That is a meaningfully different thing from a homicide investigation, and the distinction matters enormously to Lynette's family. Richard Cook, the fire team lead with Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue, has spoken publicly about the search operation and about the circumstances leading up to it. His on-record position is that he does not currently suspect foul play. What he does believe, and he has said this clearly, is that the night of April 4th involved a serious chain of bad decisions. Going out after dark, going out in those wind conditions, going out in an 8-foot dinghy for a 2.5-mile open water crossing with no moon and no light. He frames it as a tragedy born of poor judgment, not criminal intent. That is the official posture, and it has not shifted as of this recording. But Cook's framing and Carly Aylesworth's framing are operating in entirely different universes. And what Carly has done since Sunday morning is build a parallel pressure campaign designed to make sure this does not get closed as a simple boating accident. She hired an attorney almost immediately. Not to file charges, there are no charges to file right now, but to create a formal, documented line of pressure on the investigation, to ensure that someone with legal standing is asking the questions the family cannot get answered on their own. Her grandmother, Darlene Hamlet, has been racing to secure an emergency passport so she can get to the Bahamas herself, because the family says they have struggled to get direct, substantive information from Bahamian authorities. That is a family that does not trust the process to run itself. Carly has also made clear in her formal public statement that she is not ruling out the involvement of U.S. federal, state, or local authorities alongside the Bahamian police. She did not say which agencies. She did not say on what basis. But the implication is that if the Bahamian investigation does not go far enough, she intends to push it across jurisdictional lines. The U.S. State Department has confirmed it is aware of the case. Their spokesperson confirmed they are working with Bahamian authorities to provide assistance, which is the standard language the department uses for cases involving American citizens abroad. It does not signal an active federal investigation. It signals awareness and coordination. Those are not the same thing, and it would be a mistake to read more into that language than is actually there. What investigators do have on record is Brian Hooker's account, given to the Royal Bahamas Police Force in the early hours of April 5th at the Marsh Harbor boatyards after he came in from the water. He cooperated. He gave his version of events. And since then, he has retained local Bahamian counsel, an attorney named Terrell Butler, and has formally declined to speak further to the press.
So, they say it's your final chance to get your side of the story. You sure you don't want to get your side of the story?
In an email to the Daily Beast, Brian stated that he categorically denies the allegations Carly has made. That is the full extent of his public response to the domestic violence claims. One denial through an attorney, and then silence. That silence is his legal right. I want to be clear about that. Any competent defense attorney would give him the exact same advice. But silence in the context of a missing wife and a family publicly alleging a history of choking and death threats has a texture to it that is hard to ignore. What investigators have not done, at least not publicly, is independently verify or contradict the physical details of Brian's account. The kill switch mechanism, the direction of the currents that night, the exact timeline between Lynette going overboard and Brian reaching shore. None of those have been publicly scrutinized in any documented investigative statement. The flotation device was recovered, that is confirmed. But the recovery of a flotation device does not corroborate the account of how it got into the water. It only confirms it was there. The Bahamian authorities have urged anyone with information to come forward, through local emergency lines and through Crime Stoppers. As of this recording, no additional witnesses have been publicly identified. No one else was on that water that night, or if they were, they have not spoken. That is the investigation as it stands. Incomplete, open, and moving very slowly against a clock that stopped for Lynette Hooker 4 days ago. There is no gap in the traditional sense here. No weeks of silence before an arrest. No months of a suspect walking free while investigators built a case behind closed doors. This case is 4 days old as of this recording, and the gap is not between the crime and the conviction. It is between the moment Lynette went into that water and the moment the world started paying attention. That gap is measured in hours, and what happened inside those hours says something. Brian Hooker made it to shore at 4 in the morning. He reported his wife missing. He gave his account. And then, while search teams were launching in the dark, while divers were going into the water, while aerial units were sweeping the bay, Brian was present in the Bahamas, available, and saying nothing beyond what he had already told police. When CBS News located him on Tuesday and approached him directly, he declined to answer questions. No statement of grief given in person, no public appearance at the search site, no visible presence in the operation that was underway to find his wife. His first public words came on Wednesday morning, a Facebook post, written, controlled, filtered through whatever advice his attorney had given him before he typed a single word. He described himself as heartbroken. He said the winds and the currents drove them apart, despite his desperate attempts to reach her. He thanked the Bahamian authorities. He thanked the U.S. Coast Guard. He said his sole focus remained bringing Lynette home. That post has been shared and dissected across social media since it went up. People who followed the sailing hookers, who had watched Lynette and Brian document their life together for years, read that statement and felt the absence of something they could not quite name. It is written the way a person writes when they have been told to write carefully. It contains no detail that is not already in the police report. It answers nothing that the family is actually asking. Meanwhile, Carly was doing the opposite of staying quiet. She went on Fox News, she went on NBC News, she went on Good Morning America, she gave CBS News the voicemail, played it on air, let the world hear Brian's voice delivering an update about the flotation device in a tone that people across every comment section have described as eerily calm. She retained an attorney. She coordinated with her grandmother. She pushed on every front she could access simultaneously because she clearly understood that in a case like this, in a foreign jurisdiction, with no criminal investigation open and a husband who had lawyered up, silence from the family's side would mean the story dies. It did not die. The case went fully national within 48 hours. CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, every major outlet picked it up. The Web Sleuths forum opened a thread that ran to multiple pages within a day, with people who knew the waters around Elbow Cay weighing in on the currents, the crossing distance, the kill switch mechanics. A former dive team member from the Collier County Sheriff's Office in Florida told Fox News he did not suspect foul play, that in his experience, what happened that night was a tragically common kind of accident in those waters. A criminal defense attorney, also speaking to Fox, said she would advise any client in Brian's position to stay completely silent, and that Carly's ask was not a rush to judgment. It was a legitimate demand for depth. The community in Onstead, Michigan, the small town where Lynette and Brian were from, found out the way most small towns find things out now. Social media. Neighbors who had not known Lynette personally said they had followed her disappearance closely, that it had landed hard on the community, that people were hoping for answers. One resident told a local outlet plainly, "It was a crazy thing to have happened to someone from Onstead. And through all of it, one detail from the gap period has not moved. One detail has stayed exactly where Brian left it on Sunday morning, unchanged, unchallenged, uncorroborated. His account of what happened on that water is still the only account that exists. Lynette has not been found, and the sea around Elbow Cay is still not talking. Lynette Hooker has not been found." As of this recording, day 4 of the search, Wednesday, April 8th, the recovery operation is still active. Marine sweeps, aerial coverage, drone passes, divers. The Royal Bahamas Police Force has the case open. The family has legal representation pushing from the outside, and the water around Elbow Cay and Marsh Harbor has given back nothing except the flotation device Brian said he threw. That is where this case stands, and there are questions sitting inside that reality that have not been answered, and in some cases have not even been formally asked yet. The first one is the most immediate. What happens to the investigation classification if Lynette is never found? A recovery operation without a recovery eventually becomes a closed file. In the Bahamas, in a case with no criminal investigation formally opened, with a husband who has retained counsel and declined to speak, the path from here to accountability, if accountability is warranted, is not obvious. Carly has floated the possibility of U.S. federal involvement. What that looks like in practice, and whether there is a legal basis for it, depends entirely on what Bahamian authorities produce from their inquiry. Right now, that inquiry has produced nothing public beyond the initial police statement. The kill switch question has not been resolved. And Brian's account requires Lynette to have been wearing the engine safety lanyard, a cord clipped to the operator's body, while she was a passenger. Carly has said clearly that Brian always drove, always. If he was the operator, the lanyard should have been on him. The mechanics of how it ended up on Lynette or clipped in a way that went overboard with her has not been explained in any public statement from investigators. That is not a small detail. That is a load-bearing piece of the account that everything else rests on. The reconciliation has not been addressed. CBS News confirmed that Brian and Lynette had separated at some point before this trip and got back together. Nobody, not investigators, not the family, not any outlet, has gone on record about what that separation looked like, what caused it, or what the terms of the reconciliation were. In a case where the marriage history is central to the family's skepticism, that gap in the public record is significant. And then there is the motive question, the one I am not going to pretend has an answer, because it does not. If something happened on that dinghy beyond what Brian described, nobody has publicly established why. There is no life insurance policy discussed in the record. There is no documented financial dispute. What exists is a pattern of alleged behavior, choking, threats, alcohol-fueled volatility, that Carly has described in detail across multiple outlets. That pattern, if it can be documented beyond her account, is the foundation any future investigation would need to build on. What I keep coming back to is this. 2 people got into a small boat in the dark in bad weather. One of them made it to shore. One of them has not been found. And the one who made it to shore is the only person alive who knows exactly what happened in the minutes between when they left Hopetown and when he beached that dinghy at Marsh Harbor. Carly Aylesworth is not asking for a conviction. She has been careful to say that if this was truly an accident, she can find a way to accept it, but only after every fact has been examined without shortcuts. That is not an unreasonable ask. That is the minimum that Lynette deserves. Whether the Bahamian authorities, the U.S. State Department, or anyone else with the power to dig deeper decides that minimum is worth meeting. That is the question this case is waiting on right now. Lynette Hooker spent over a decade building a life that most people only dream about. She sailed away from the ordinary and chose the open water, with a camera in her hand, a sense of humor in her captions, and a hunger for the kind of living that doesn't fit inside 4 walls. She deserved to grow old doing exactly that. Whatever the truth is out there near Elbow Cay, it needs to be found. For her, for Carly, for every person who watched her document that life and believed it was exactly what it looked like. If this case moves you the way it moved me, stay close. Subscribe, hit that like button, and we will keep following it as it develops. Next up, a case where the silence lasted years, and when it broke everything.